Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Stanley, you can't really see that box very well, CEFBB179-54, 4.5 by 6. This is a real unusual wide throw hinge. This is a real unusual power transfer hinge. I don't know that I've ever done a wide throw and power transfer, but nonetheless, here it is. This is a electric through wire hinge, steel based, 5-knuckle, full mortise, a -54, which means a 4-wire hinge. That means on the back there's going to be 2 pair of wires coming through, which is for sure the most common electric hinge, but you can do others. 6-wire, 8-wire, 10-wire, and that is it. You can also do a 2-wire with an 18 gauge wire. These are 28 gauge that are coming off here. Okay, why? Well, because you are electrically controlling a lock or an exit device or an electromagnetic door holder, an electromagnetic door lock. Any instance where you need to get some power into the door from the wall, a through wire hinge would be the hinge that you would need. And I gotta tell you, I always really appreciate when I review a Stanley hinge, and it's just because their fit and finish is superior. It's just a hinge, and no one's really going to notice how nice it looks, I suppose, or the contractor may not, but I sure do. And as a result, Stanley continues to impress me and continues to reinforce the opinion that I have that it'd be the hinge that I would personally want. Just their fit and finish is nice. Every time you look at it when you get it, it's just in good shape. Some stamping on the back of the leaf. Let's focus on that for a moment. Okay, now let's dissect this part number. A CE, and there's a link below this video to the installation instructions, and we can just review it there on the screen. And they are literally included with your packaging. So you're going to have a CE, an electric hinge. Then you're going to have an FBB179. All of that's going to mean that it's going to be steel-based, that it is a ball bearing hinge, and that its standard weight, the leaf thickness, is 134 thousandths, which means on a ball bearing hinge you'll have 2 bearing packets. It's full mortise as well. You can see from the swag on the hinge leaves there that they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame when the leaves are brought parallel to each other to allow that typical gap between the edge of the door and the frame. It means that the location of the screw holes are in a template pattern. It means that these locations are specifically determined and are called template. It is the way that we say if they're template, that means they're going to be in these exact locations. Okay, if it's a template hinge. The -54 in the part number, that's where the hinge starts to get its definition of the fact that it is a CE hinge, a CE, and the 54 is going to tell us that we have a 4-wire hinge, specifically going to handle up to 1 amp of current through the door. Not current, but power through the door. 6, 12, or 24 volt AC or DC. All of the electrical characteristics of the hinge are there. The max inrush not to exceed 0.05 seconds. Max rating 50 volts, 1 amp. for a continuous type of use. That inrush can be 15 amps if you're at, 50 milliseconds, a 20th of a second. The table down below there shows the other variations of the quantity of wires through the hinge, -56, -58, or -10. And you'll notice how the maximum current will change as the quantity of wires change as well. Okay. You've got the -66. Quantity of wires. Now, as we're looking at the installation instructions, it's not very clear what the gauge of wire is on the -54, but if you hop over to the other link that's downloaded, that's available on the item profile itself, called Template, you'll be able to review a little more detail in terms of what the wire gauge is, and then the location of not only the templated screw holes, but also the location of where the through wire preparation has been done. Now, the gauge of the wires obviously is important to know when you are determining how much current you're going to run through the wires. So you want to be sure that you have adequate wire gauge for what you're doing. Obviously, the table is there, the -54 are 4 wires, 28 gauge. You get into that -66, you're going to have 4 wires that are 28 gauge, but then 2 that are 24 gauge. If you need to power something through that hinge, that's going to require a larger wire size, a thicker wire, okay, to be able to control, handle more current. Other than that, everything else is 28 gauge, except back to the installation instructions. I think they have the -18, which will give you a couple of 18 gauge wires where you need to run a lot of power. 10 amps is a tremendous amount of energy to transfer through a hinge. 10 amps will definitely get your attention. So it's important to note the location of the screw holes, especially if you're replacing existing. If you've got an existing door and frame, be mindful of where those holes are located and compare that against the existing prior to ordering this. A wide throw hinge electrified is certainly a custom non-returnable type of purchase. Drilling the 3/4 hole to run the power through, that is literally drawn off the template, and you will literally modify the hinge plate and then the door location to receive that. You will also see references in the bottom table of other hinge part numbers. So you'll see in the column of steel hinges, we're dealing with the second, the CEFBB179. That's a steel-based hinge in a BB version. There is also, in an FBB version, there is also the CB version, a concealed bearing type hinge, meaning the knuckles on the hinge are going to look quite standard, but there will be concealed bearing sort of preparation to the hinges, which is aesthetically a superior way to see the hinges. And you'll see hinges that do not appear to have ball bearing, but when it's hanging a 4070 door and it's a Stanley hinge, that'll be a CB hinge certainly. The 179 turns into a 168 when your hinge leaf goes to heavyweight. Your 179 will turn into a 191, or a 168 will turn into a 199 when the base material changes from ferrous-based to stainless-based, or non-ferrous. It doesn't have to be stainless. It can be brass or bronze kind of hinge as well. You've got the HT versions as well, your hospital tip versions for security sorts of applications. And that concludes reviewing the template and the installation instructions. This is in 26D satin chrome, so that means, actually it's proper to call this 652. Steel base material, satin chrome brushed finish is what that means. Where are you going to use this hinge? Well, obviously where you need to transfer power. Electrified lock set most likely. Maybe you need to have Maybe it's a pair of doors and you are going to run an electric strike or an electrified exit device. Or maybe you need to have some sort of monitoring happening on the door. Whatever the reason is that you need to get power through the door, this would be an elegant way to go. Available, of course, in all of the finishes that Stanley can make hinges in, such as your chromes, your brasses, your bronze, your nickels, oil rubbed, satin polished. And being Stanley, they can certainly accommodate most all requests for custom finishes as well. Finally, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up. Let's back this train up. This is a 4.5 by 6. That means that this hinge is 4.5 tall. Tall. The first dimension is the height. Why does that matter? Because you have a rectangular hinge, and you need to be mindful of making sure that you understand that the width is the second dimension. It runs opposite of what doors are. The width is the first dimension on a door, not on a hinge. I don't know why. I don't know the history of who decided, how it was decided that hinges would be height first, but it's really important. If you've got a 4.5 inch by 4.5 inch hinge, you can get away with not knowing which is the first dimension. But when you're dealing with a 4.5 by 6, or a 5 by 4.5, or a 4.5 by 4, you have to know that the height is the first dimension. Why? Well, certainly because if you're ordering doors and frames and you have a specification, let's say, for 5 by 4.5 inch, and you're going to order hinges and you're going to order doors, you have to know that it's not 4.5 by 5, it's 5 by 4.5. So that's why it's important. And plus, it's a common sort of question, and I don't want you to make the same mistake I did many years ago. Finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Stanley products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. If you have any questions on the Stanley CEFBB179 4.5 by 6 wide throw hinge 4-wire or any other Stanley product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you very much.